In trigonometry, we'll be using SOHCAHTOA and sine, cos and tan to help us work out the sides or the angles of a triangle that is a right angle. In these examples in this video, we'll be looking at finding the sides. Another video will show you about the angles. So the first thing to remember is that when you're using trigonometry, it only works on a right angle triangle. So you need a right angle in your triangle. You need to label the triangle with opposite, adjacent and hypotenuse. That helps you decide which rule to use. There are three that you can choose from: sine, cosine and tangent, and SOHCAHTOA is the word that helps you remember those rules. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, etc. So let's look at an example. If you look at the steps, the first thing to do is to label the triangle. So in this triangle here, the hypotenuse is the longest side, the opposite is the side that's not next to the angle, and the adjacent is the side that is next to the angle. In this triangle, the two things that I'm interested in here are x and the 4. That means I want to use the opposite and the adjacent. So I need a rule with opposite and adjacent in it, and that is tan. Tan is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So from SOHCAHTOA, I know that I need to use tan. So I write the rule: tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Then I just substitute. Now, theta is 30 degrees. So what I do is I write tan 30 equals opposite. Now, opposite is x and adjacent is 4. So I write, substitute in, I put x over 4. So you can see that it's just a matter of writing out the equation. You've got to choose the correct one, of course, and that's why we label it. Then substituting in x where there's an O, and 4 where there's an A, and 30 where there's an angle. Once we've done that, we can solve. Now you'll notice that the thing that's stopping x being by itself is the 4. So I need to get rid of that. The opposite of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4, so I multiply both sides by 4. They cancel on the right hand side, and I end up with x equals 4 tan 30, which means 4 times the tan of 30. Now, tan of 30 is something that you work out on your calculator. On my calculator, if I do tan 30, I get 0.577, and there's a whole string of numbers that goes on forever. So when I multiply that by 4, I get that x is equal to 2.309, etc., etc., etc. So for these examples, I'm going to limit it to one decimal place. So I'm going to write that x is equal to 2.3 centimetres. In this next example, I need to go through the same procedure. So the first thing to do is label the triangle. So this side's the adjacent, that's the hypotenuse, and that's the opposite. The opposite being not next to the angle, the adjacent being next to the angle, and the hypotenuse being the longest side that doesn't touch the right angle. So from that, I can see that the sides that I'm interested in are this one and this one, A and H. So from A and H, I'll be doing SOHCAHTOA, so I'll be using cosine. So cosine of theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Substitute the values in. So cos of 30 degrees is equal to x over 5. So again, I need to solve for x and make x the subject. The 5 is stopping it being by itself, so I need to multiply both sides by 5. On the right hand side, they cancel. So I end up with x equals 5 cos 30. And the answer to that, rounded to one decimal place, is 4.3 centimetres. In this last example, for finding a side, I'll do the same thing again. I'm going to label the triangle. So this one's the adjacent, that's the hypotenuse, that's the opposite. So because I've got the adjacent and the hypotenuse, again, I'll be using cosine. See cosine, right? So the rule is cosine theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Next, I need to substitute in. Now this time, it's a little bit different. So cos 60 is equal to 3 over x. We have a slightly different problem here because x is now a denominator and not a numerator. To get an answer, we need x to be a numerator. So the thing to do is to first of all multiply both sides by x. They cancel over here on the right, and x is now a numerator on the left-hand side. It's not by itself, but at least it's a numerator. Now, what we need to do then is get rid of the cos 60, which is multiplied by x. So I divide both sides by cos 60. Cos 60 is just one number. So when we cancel the whole thing. So cos 60 cancels with cos 60 and goes into itself one time. So that means we end up with x is equal to 3 over cos 60. The answer to that is 3 divided by cos 60. Cos 60 is a half, so 3 divided by a half is 6 centimetres. A potential problem with trigonometry for students is the way calculators work, and unfortunately different calculators can work differently depending on the brand. So this is something you need to check with your teacher.